Thank you all. Thank you. And thank you too for your patience with the slightly later start. Our students don't drive to school yet, at least I don't think they do here at Hall Middle School, so our parking lot's pretty petite, as you noticed. So thank you for whatever little trek that you had to take over here. But it's a nice night, right? I'm Eric Sable, principal at Hall Middle School. It's an honor, it's a privilege to have the community here right in our gym to listen to a really important message. Certainly something that might have its core in athletics, youth sports, but really I think it's something that is pertinent to parenting, pertinent to us in education, and all the different things that we do with our kids every day in the school setting, and certainly, of course, in the realm of youth sports. And actually, we just felt so strongly about wanting to share this with our student body. Once tonight's over, we're leaving the chairs set up. Tomorrow morning, our kids come in, and they're going to have a chance to hear from our presenter tonight and have him share this message with them too. So just want to acknowledge a few people. Our PTA here is one of the key partnerships that we have, and this is true at any school. The work that our parents do, from helping us bring in speakers to the nitty-gritty stuff of serving hot lunch every day, is absolutely essential to how we operate. The parent education crew has had a true vision to make tonight happen. They brought it to us and they said, hey man, this is something that we really want to see happen here. How can we do this? And not just have it be something that benefits the Hall community, but also to let's extend it out to our partner schools and other communities around Marin County. So I want to acknowledge and embarrass them at the same time. Sky Sailor Hand, Megan DeGrave, and Monica Canes. Let's stand up. There they are. They're over there. There they are. I promise. Yep. Oh my gosh, thank you, and sorry about that. But also too, this is a partnership between the Hall PTA, Parent Ed crew, and a lot of other entities to make sure that we could get our speaker here tonight. Marin County Office of Education, Kentfield School District, Ross Valley School District, Mill Valley Middle School, Marin Primary and Middle School, Reed Union School District. Also too, we have families and leadership from Cove Elementary and Neil Cummins. We, I think, have guests as well from our neighboring school, St. Pat's. Invitations went out to Mill Valley Little League, Twin Cities Little League. So there's a lot of us in the house, and it's really fun to have an event here that is beyond our smaller Hall community. Okay, so let me introduce you to the gentleman that you all came to see. John O'Sullivan is an internationally known TEDx speaker and the founder of the Changing the Game project, which he started in 2012 in order to better educate parents, coaches, and youth sports organizations, and I'll add school administrators, teachers, everybody, and put some more play in playing sports. John is a former collegiate and professional soccer player and coached for 20 years on the youth, high school, and college level. He's been an advisor and presenter for numerous sporting organizations across the globe, including U.S. soccer, football, lacrosse, swimming, and hockey. And he sits on the National Advisory Board for the Positive Coaching Alliance and the National Association for Physical Literacy. John is the author of 2 #1 best-selling books, and his blog gets nearly 5 million visits a year. His goal today is to start a discussion about changing the environment in youth sports so we can keep more kids active, healthy, and involved in physical activity. I introduce to you John O'Sullivan.
Thank you all. I live in Bend, Oregon, and I've seen nothing but smoke for the last month. So thank you for this incredible weather and this incredible day. I'm glad I flew in early today. I just spent an amazing hour with a bunch of your coaches across. I know there was soccer there was baseball there was people from CrossFit gyms, there were rugby coaches there, talking about what our kids need from their coaches. And so thank you all for coming out and talking about how we can leave a legacy for our kids in sport, how we can help them compete to their very best of their ability, but at the same time, enjoy this experience and get all those important life lessons out of it that sport can bring. I want to start with a little story. I listened to an interview a couple months ago from an American sport performance coach, and his name is Rhett Larson. He's a strength and conditioning coach. About 7 or 8 years ago, he got hired by the Chinese Olympic Committee to go over there and work with a bunch of their Olympic sports. These are individual sports like table tennis and a couple others. And they were having all these horrendous overuse injuries and all these problems with their athletes, like overuse injuries in table tennis, right? And, weightlifting injuries for table tennis players. And so he got over there and he said the way that they were doing the strength and conditioning program was what we were doing in the United States 30 or 40 years ago. And he said, but I had a decision to make. I could go in and flip it all on its head and throw everything out, and as soon as something went wrong, as soon as the first person who was expected to win a medal didn't, who were they going to blame? Me. And I was going to get fired. So he said, so here's what I did. I decided, and I asked them, I said, you know what? Give me 10%. Give me 15% that you'll let me change right now. And I know that if I tweak that, your athletes are going to start getting better performance, and they're going to start performing better, and they're going to stop getting hurt, and a lot of good stuff's going to happen. And then you're going to come back to me and be like, what else do you got? So he said over time, he got his 10%, and then he got his 15%, and then it became 30, and then it became 40. And then they liked him so much that right before the Rio Olympics, they gave him the one team of women's volleyball that had a chance to win a medal in Rio. And he worked with them, and they went in 8th ranked in the world, and they won gold. He's like, so now I can do whatever I want in China. He said, but in the beginning, I had to be smart. I had to take my 10%. And so I tell that story because I really like that story, and I tell it to coaches a lot, and I tell this to parents a lot. Tonight, I'm going to throw a lot of stuff at you. And there is no way that you took the time to be here tonight because you need to throw out everything you've ever done. All I'm saying to you is this: look for your 10%. Look for that 15%, one thing or two things that maybe you can take for this and say, maybe if I do that a little bit differently, good things might happen, right? And if that 10% works, then pick something else out. Anytime tonight, if you want to take a picture of a screen or whatever, you're welcome to. Your chairs have a place to take notes. I know they have some extra pencils up front if you want them. If you have a question, please ask it. But I hope my goal here tonight is that you can find your 10%, you can find your 15%, and that you'll take that and you'll share it with other people who think like you. And that's how we can start transforming sports. What I'm going to talk about is kind of in 3 parts tonight. Part 1, I want to talk about some of the mythology around sport. How we ended up where we are, and the things that we're told as parents, we have to do this or my kid will fall behind. And we're going to dispel a few myths with this stuff they call actual science. Number 2, we'll talk about psychology of performance. What makes kids tick? What's going to help them play their best and what doesn't? And then number 3, we're going to talk about 3 things you can do walking out of here tonight that's going to help your kids perform better. If you're a coach, help your athletes perform better. And then talk about how we can share this message to the community abroad. So my story started, Eric kind of gave my introduction, but my story of Changing the Game project started with the Mighty Unicorns. Right? This was my daughter's first soccer team. I was watching this typical 6-year-old soccer game. You've probably seen that, right? The giant blob. Right? And they trample each other. And every once in a while, some kid's lucky enough to dribble it far enough that she breaks out of the blob, and she scores. And it doesn't matter what goal it goes in. She's equally as excited. But this was this perfect day, it looked like today, September fall day. The kids are having fun, and the coaches are positive, and the parents are positive. There's no referee to yell at because it's 6-year-old soccer. And I'm thinking, this is perfect. This is what sports is supposed to be about. And then right next door, there's a, quote, competitive 10-year-old boys game. And it's competitive not because the kids are competing harder, right? Because all the adults are competing harder. And the parents are yelling at the kids, and the coaches are yelling at the kids, and everyone's yelling at the ref who's like 13, right? And I'm thinking, and I'm watching this, and a kid makes a bad pass, and the other team steals it and scores a goal, and his coach jumps off the bench and screams at him and says, "Get out of the game." And he's walking off the field with his head down, and his coaches are yelling at him, and the parents are yelling at him, and all I'm thinking to myself is, this is nuts. This kid is trying to play a sport that's really, really hard to learn. He's probably doing what his coach asked him to do in practice. He made a mistake, and all the adults in his life are yelling at him because he made a mistake playing soccer. How much longer is that kid going to play? And so I had two thoughts. Number one was, does anyone on my field want that in a couple of years? And obviously I was thinking, no. And number two, I was thinking to myself, who's running this league? And it was me. It was my league. And so that was that little inkling of, well, why are we not doing anything to help the parents and help the coaches understand what kids really want out of this? And so that was kind of the day that, hey, maybe I can do a little more. And I decided to put pen to paper on a book and start the Change the Game project. Now, I had no idea what it would be like now. Right? I was like, I'll write a book. And then they're like, yeah, and how will people know you have a book? Oh, I don't know, I haven't got that far, right? And so it started with a blog, and then it rolled into a TED Talk, and now, as Eric said, I get to do this incredible travel and consulting with sports organizations all over the world. And it's amazing, and it's fun. But it keeps coming back to everyone in the world is doing the same thing. How can we make sports more about the needs and the values and the priorities of the participants and not the adults surrounding them? When they ask kids, right, one study, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, when kids listed 90 characteristics that made sports not fun. 70 of those things had to do with the adults, only 20 with the other kids playing. So we'll get through a couple of those things. So that's how Change the Game Project was born. And researching this book, I kept coming across all this stuff and being like, wow, I should have learned this in coaching school. But no one ever taught me that. I interviewed parents of older athletes, and I said, if you could hit rewind and come back 10 years, what would you do differently? And they said, boy, I wish I knew how quickly this goes by, because very soon you have no one left to drive to practice. And they said, number two, I wish I knew what was going to be important, because I thought it was important that we won the 11-year-old Super Duper Elite Cup. But my kids don't remember that. What do they remember? The hotel. Right? My daughter played her first travel soccer tournament last year, and I had flown in from a speaking engagement to Portland, Oregon, and I'm watching her first game. Her team's not very good, and they get clobbered. It's like 10-0. And so I'm thinking, I've got to be this good dad, changing the game project guy, have the right words for my daughter. She's going to be so humiliated and upset. And she comes over after the game, and I walk up to her. I'm like, hey, Mag, how's it going? She's like, Dad, the hotel has a pool. Right? So that's the Change the Game project. One of the most crazy things that I came across, and you've probably all heard this if you haven't, is that we lose 7 out of 10 children to organized sports by the age of 13. At this exact age where physical activity matters, where children who are active at 10, 11, 12 years old are far more likely to be active their entire life. They do better in school, 1/10 the rate of obesity, less likely to do drugs, more likely to go to college, lower healthcare costs, more likely to raise active children of their own. Today's 10-year-old children have a 5-year shorter life expectancy than we do as their parents, due to inactivity. And at the exact ages where they need to be moving, they're dropping out of sports. And our schools are cutting PE and cutting recess time and demanding more time in seats, despite all the evidence that shows the positive correlation between activity and academics. So we're losing these kids. So why are we losing them? Who played sports growing up? Just show your hands. Okay, if you're still growing up in here, you can pick your head up. What's different? We can kind of shout out a couple things or whatever. What's different about sports today for your kids than you feel like it was for you growing up? Time commitment. How so? Right, and probably, so time commitment, not only hours per week, but there's not really seasons a lot anymore either. Right? Yeah.
Too much organization.
Really organized. How about free play, right? Remember that? I used to play pond. I grew up in New York. I used to play pond hockey, right? On Saturday when I came home from playing pond hockey, I think my parents asked me, "Did you win?" What did they ask? Right? You have fun, and did anyone fall through the ice? Right? Yeah. So we've lost free play. Yes, sir.
Each sport wants you to go all in together.
All in way too soon. Way too soon. And we're going to talk about that one in a second. What else? So travel teams. And I think there's always been travel teams, but younger, right? So younger, right? And these, elite teams. People ask me this, right? These clubs, how do we make ourselves an elite club? I'm like, just change your name. That's what everyone else does. All right? Yes, ma'am. Cost. Yeah, and injuries, is that what you said? Yeah. So cost, number one, because of travel, because of year-round, because of this professionalization, and then injuries because of those same things. Yep. So those are big differences.
It becomes the whole family's priority, it feels like, where before, like parents would just drop their kid off, and now it's like everyone's, it's sort of like the whole family's just focused on it.
Right. It's really hard, and this focus on the families that I meet who just we can't take vacation because of it, or it becomes the vacation, which can be a great thing. I'm not saying time with your kids is a bad thing, but it can cross the line to, well, this is our form of entertainment, watching 11-year-old baseball, right? And then they're like, oh, but our kid's an incredible player. I'm like, he's got a mustache. Yeah.
Email group class. We didn't have email back then.
We didn't have
Even
email.
exposure is so much more. You choose.
Yeah, so this prevalence of information, of staying in touch, which isn't necessarily in and of itself a bad thing, but then I think we add to that also social media and this idea that everyone posts all their successes, no one posts their 8th place ribbons, right? So we post our successes, so we sit there going, oh my God, like, look what everyone else is doing, what's wrong with my DNA? Or we see some 11-year-old soccer player from Barcelona, and we say, my kid's not that good. What's happening? Is my kid going to miss out? Right? So we have this whole culture of everything is so public that sometimes we forget that every child is on his or her own journey and own timeline and development. For one, is who has more than one kid in here, right? I do, right? Are they the same? They ate the same food, had the same parents, all that stuff, and yet they're different, right? And so, but then we assume that 12 8-year-old soccer players are going to be on the same exact path, right? It's not how that works. Yeah. So we covered a whole bunch of stuff here. And there's good things, right? There's certainly opportunities in science, and I think in some cases the professionalization of coaching is giving kids more knowledge and things like that. But overall, if we're losing 3/4 of kids, to me that says, okay, there's some things that aren't right here. So I think there's these 3 big myths that cause kids to quit. And we're going to break them down here because some of you might have older kids, some might have younger ones. But I think it's really, really important to understand what the actual science says about these things. So myth number 1 is this one. He's very good. To be fair. Right? We don't work on that till 2. He can't stand, but he's got a wicked forehead. So this push for early specialization, right? More, younger. Here's what the actual science says. From an athlete development standpoint, there's a couple of sports where athletes hit their athletic peak in their early to mid-teenage years. That would be female figure skating and gymnastics. Right? That's why you watch Olympic gymnasts, and those kids are, I think they have a minimum age of 16 because they'd be 14 if they couldn't, right? That's when they hit their peak. But across all these team sports where athletes don't hit their peak until their 20s, this idea that they have to do all these hours really, really young, from a sport development standpoint, it's just not true. What the science says is that a child who specializes in a single sport prior to the age of 12 is 70 to 90% more likely to get hurt. Twice the rate of overuse injury, far higher burnout and dropout rate, and also a higher prevalence of psychological identity issues when they do get hurt, when they do drop out of sport, that their whole identity is, John the soccer player, not John the guy who plays soccer, and that's just something I do, not who I am. So yes, there are athletes who have gone all in and done well. There's plenty of examples of ones who don't. Now what happened was, a couple years ago, we had Malcolm Gladwell, whose books I quite like, coin a term called the 10,000 hour rule. Who's heard this? Right, who knows it's not true? Right? There's no such thing as the 10,000 hour rule. And it's crazy because I go to coaching conferences and people are still talking about this. We're supposed to be high-level coaching educators. I'm like, you've never actually read the research or anything. That's crazy. Malcolm Gladwell actually retracted that chapter. He said I should have never said that in his defense. But it's a very sticky term, right? You need 10,000 hours of practice. Like that is some sort of magical boundary that when you cross that threshold, leave, right? Think about that. Well, first of all, does anyone know who the actual 10,000 hour research was done on? Anyone know? Close, musicians, violin players, Berlin Academy of Music, by a man named Anders Ericsson, who was actually looking at the efficacy of practice. What type of practice makes a difference? And what Ericsson found was that there was a whole range of hours that these elite violinists had practiced. And he was looking at what kind of practice they did. But when you think about something like sport development, think about all the things that go into it. Certainly it's not just practice. Right? What if we asked all the centers in the NBA, how many hours have you practiced basketball? And then we said, if you practice basketball 9,722 hours on average, you can play center in the NBA. Oh yeah, and you have to be 7 feet tall. Right? So there's so many things that goes into sport development, like genetics, like motivation, coaching, opportunity, the culture you grow up in. All those things matter. But this 10,000 hour thing, there was like soccer clubs that mapped out 10,000 specific hours. Or started saying we need to get 10,000 hour touches in practice. Why? Well, because we do. Why? What does that have to do? What if I only get 9,000? Right? What does that mean? And so this push for specialization has driven, kids younger and younger, only one sport. And then coaches, the professionalization of sport has said, if we don't sign them up year-round, lacrosse will, or hockey will, or soccer will, or baseball will. But none of these things are being done because that's what's best for kids. Now think about this. If all our sports were played in the water, what's the first thing we would teach kids to do? Swim. All our sports pretty much are played on land. And yet we don't teach kids how to run, how to jump, how to move efficiently. And what happens is we start layering sport-specific skills on this shaky foundation, on this castle built in sand. And eventually they're going to get hurt. And so even sports, again, soccer is my sport, and I've been to Manchester United, where their performance person said every kid under age of 12 should play more than one sport. Where if you go to Man United or Barcelona or to Ajax, those kids who are there, and they're not playing travel baseball, don't get me wrong, but they're multi-sport athletes. They have parkour coaches, they do gymnastics and tumbling and martial arts, they do yoga. They're developing all-around athleticism. Because if they don't, they get hurt. It doesn't matter how much skill they have, if they get hurt too much, they can't practice enough to have a breakthrough. So we need to work at younger ages on teaching movement and developing athleticism, and a multi-sport experience does that. And if you're in a place where your son or your daughter is only really financially and time commitment wise allowed to do one sport, then you have to create that multi-sport experience by signing them up for parkour, by sending them to open gym. Right, at Man United, they hired these parkour coaches because they were having all these upper body injuries from their kids, broken wrists and shoulders, because kids don't know how to fall out of a tree anymore. Right? So this is this push for specialization. All right, number 2 is this myth that childhood success is a great predictor of adult success. Myth number 2. Who makes the team when you are making cuts and picking A and B and C teams? Pretty much basically under the age of 16, besides the coach's kid, that's a different topic. Who makes the team? Better athletes? Older kids, thank you. We call it bigger, stronger, faster, older kids. This is known as the relative age effect. It's been studied in every single sport that if you were born within 3 months of the arbitrary calendar cutoff date, you have a far more likely to make the A team. I was just in Barcelona, Spain. I have a friend who coaches in La Masia, their famed youth academy there. Their cutoff date is January 1st. 92% of the kids in La Masia are born between January and June. So either there's a relative age effect or there's something about being born July to December that makes you a bad soccer player. Right? Think about that for a young kid who's born in January versus December. That could be 10, 15% of their life. Right? Think about the difference between a 3rd grader and a 4th grader, a kindergartner and a 1st grader. So the earlier that we start selecting kids out, right, all we're doing is picking the ones who mature first. Right? And it's not a good long-term development. What we know for long-term development, what we should do in sport, train as many kids as possible, as long as possible, best coaching, best environment possible, let them grow, see what happens at the other end. Because for every Tiger Woods, and sure, Tiger's path was golf from the get-go, there's plenty of other examples, right? In soccer. Just reading an article about this guy today. This player, when he was 11 years old in soccer, was the fastest kid in his province, and he was part of a very famous soccer academy in England. At 15, he was going through his growth spurt, and he'd gone from the fastest to the 7th fastest on his team. 7th fastest on his team. And he was struggling, and the coaches decided we need to figure out if he's going to get a full scholarship to continue in the academy or we let him go. And they voted. 3 said keep him, 3 said cut him. And so they brought in the scout who first saw him. He said, we need to be patient because he's just growing. And we haven't seen what's going to come out the other end here yet. So on a 4-3 vote, Southampton kept this guy named Gareth Bale. Now considered the fastest player in the world. Right? He was clocked in a game the other day running 22 miles an hour, which is insane in a soccer game. 22 miles an hour. The fastest player in the world was the 7th fastest 15-year-old. Right? So when we meet coaches who say, oh yeah, those 9-year-olds, I can pick them. We're just picking the older kids. That's all we're doing. Right? We need to do better. Because when we start picking those teams and start worrying about the results, right, we lose sight of the process, the development, the need to lose and learn from it, and all those things. When it becomes all about the outcome, it becomes all about this outcome-focused mindset I'm sure you've heard about in your schools, this fixed mindset. I either got it or I don't. And that's not how it works. Athletic development is long, and it's, we think talent development's like this. It's not. It's messy. It's disgusting. Kids grow, they don't. They change so much. They change month to month. This idea that, we can predict them month to month is crazy. So I got roped into coaching again last year, and so now I'm coaching all the girls in the soccer club where I live, born in 2005. And so it's 2 teams. So the tryouts, before I announced the results, my plan was that we were going to train together a ton. There was going to be lots of player movement between the teams. And all I did at tryouts was I called the parents up and I said, hey, any girls born in January, come here. And they come up and said, anyone born November, December, come here. And they stood there. And these girls here, well, not that long, but these girls here, and my daughter's a December birthday. down here, right? I said, this is the difference in 1 year. So why I would lock these players on a team for an entire year based on where they are right today makes no sense. By the same token for these girls here. So that's why there's going to be lots of player movement, right? Because this idea that we cut kids and we get rid of kids really young, it makes no sense from a sporting standpoint, never mind a human development standpoint. So that's number 2. And then the third myth is just this idea that maybe sports is this great financial investment. Right, yeah. Especially where you live. 97% of high school athletes do not play a sport in college. About 1% varies among sport, get financial aid to do so. The average athletic award, these are statistics straight from the NCAA, the average athletic award is now about $12,000 a year. Right? So sport has this incredible potential to be an investment in life lessons, character development, if done right, dealing with adversity, working with others, dealing with a difficult coach sometimes, or difficult teammates. And something like a scholarship, that can be icing on the cake, but it can't be the cake itself. Now, I grew up in New York, which is a pretty competitive thing, and I made my college decision, I think, the spring of my senior year. Right? It's scary when we have, I know if some of you have high-level young, especially female soccer players, or, well, finally lacrosse has outlawed it, but, making verbal commitments in 8th grade or 9th grade, that's insane. Right? That's insane. And it's not, it's just based on this kind of fear. It's not a financial investment where you get your money back. And what's really scary, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation did a study where they asked parents of high school athletes. So the percentage of high school athletes that turn pro is about 0.01% when you average all sports. And they asked parents of high school athletes, do you think your kid has a shot of turning pro? 29% said, yes, I do. 29%. But what's really scary was that number got higher in areas where the socioeconomic level got lower. So it's seen as this way out, right? So that's scary. So these 3 myths, I think, really drive a lot of the kids walking away. This outcome-focused, early specialization, injuries, burnout, drives kids out of things that they should love. And so I think our job as parents, we are not advocate for the athlete, we're advocate for the person, is how can we guide them through this difficult situation where I can talk about ideals, but we live in the real world, how do we deal with this? Right? So I'm going to talk about that now. So, why do kids play? This isn't a trick question. Fun, right? You think this kid's talking tactics here? Because it's fun. So what makes sports fun for kids? We have research on this. The latest is from a woman named Amanda Visick, George Washington University. She does a study called Fun Integration Theory for the Aspen Institute. And 9 out of 10 kids said, why do you play? Because it's fun. So she said, define fun. And they came up with 81 characteristics of fun. Being with my friends, learning new things, being taught, coaches who push me, teammates and coaches who treat me well. Those make sports fun. Number 48 on the list, winning. 48. Kids like to win, they value winning, right? But it's not the most important thing. It's not what gets them back there over and over and over. Right? Work down in the 60s, going to tournaments, working with private coaches. I told the coaches before, dead last, taking team pictures. So use that how you wish. That's what makes sports fun. Now, there's this big myth or this confusion that fun equals silliness. But kids say silliness isn't fun. They say teammates fooling around. That doesn't make it fun. That makes it not fun. It makes it not fun. Pleasure and enjoyment aren't the same thing. Anyone here a runner? Raise your hands. Anyone here run a marathon? Okay, marathon runners. Is there any pleasure mile 20 to 26? No. Would you still enjoy running? Yeah. Right? It's different. It's different. Sports has to be about enjoyment. It's a critical component. Doing some work with the U.S. Olympic Committee's director of coaching education, and they started doing surveys, intake surveys of athletes going to Colorado Springs to the Olympic Training Center. And those same athletes, full Olympians, junior Olympians, when they ask them, why do you do this? It's still because it's fun. Now they might define fun differently than an 8-year-old, but it's still got to be about enjoyment, right? And as coaches and as parents, we always need to check in with that. Is this still fun? Is this still fun? Right? Because when it stops being fun, they're going to walk away. Now, what was that a question again?
I just want to double check. They asked the kids what they thought was fun about sports, and these kids came up with 47 things before winning?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yep. I'll give the website. I think I put it. Oh no, it's not on that one. I think I have it in another slide. But if you just go to Project Play, and you can read their report, and you can link straight to the research. And the woman Amanda Visick, I just interviewed her for our podcast. It's not out yet. She hasn't published the not fun research yet. You know, like it's done. But in going back and asking kids what makes it not fun, like I said before, of the 90 things that made it not fun, 70 had to do with the parents and the coaches, right? So yeah, that's what they came up with. That was her research. Now again, as a coach, I know that I don't show up thinking there's 47 things more important than winning, and I don't think there's anything wrong. I love winning as a competitive athlete. I truly believe in that. And again, this is research, and this means a generalization. This is an average. So just because the average says 47 things about winning doesn't mean it is for your kid or my kid, right? So these are important things to realize. That battery just stuck. Hey, whoa. All right. So that doesn't mean that there's 47 things more important to every kid, but just knowing that it's not, the outcomes are a very adult-driven value, right? Why are we here? Well, we're here to win, and we're here because this game is supposed to look like the game I saw on ESPN. And that's not necessarily what it is or how it works, right? So, that's why kids play. Now in this right here, I like this. This is from a book a man wrote many years ago, Tim Gallwey, called The Inner Game of Tennis. He writes, performance is potential minus interference. How kids play is their potential, their genetics, their hours of practice, all these things, minus interference. And the single greatest thing that interferes with performance is between their ears. Right? It's their state of mind. I've yet to meet the coach who's like, our team lost all our skill today. Who would you show up and say they weren't focused, they weren't into it? I talked with the coaches, this idea that performance is behavior, not an outcome. Performance is a behavior, and as coaches, we create behaviors which lead to outcomes. Performance, as coaches, sometimes as parents, we interfere with outcomes. And so I want to show you what I mean by this with two quick videos. So the first video is my daughter when she was 7 at her first piano recital. Watch what happens when she makes a mistake. So she's been playing piano 3 months. She does pretty well. We're not expecting her to play the entire symphony. We know that piano's hard, that she's young. Did anyone think that her piano teacher was going to yell at her when she bobbled? Right? Or that some parent would yell out like, Maggie, you're ruining the recital. There was this great Canadian broadcasting radio show they did where they did the spoof on sports parents, and they called it Orchestra Parents. And it was great, and this guy is like there, and he's like, the Bruins are killing us tonight. Right, so it makes no sense there, right? And so in all these other aspects, right, we don't go to our kids' math class and yell at them to carry the one, right? And we have this, yet as soon as the game starts, we lose all sort of common sense. And so let's compare that video to this video of that I found on YouTube of a 6-year-old soccer game. All right, it's not from here. You're all in the clear here. All right, 6-year-old soccer game.
That's the report about this battle. I got it.
Listen, the guy's filming said she's like a cheerleader on crack. Now, you know, I don't want to pick on her because, like, does she love her kids? Oh my God, yeah. Is she trying to help? Yes. Is she helping? That's really the question. Like I said, I found that on YouTube. I had no idea where that was. I eventually spoke in that community. Thank God she wasn't in the room. But so I do know where it was filmed. I won't share it. This is sadly similar to every day. We can find something similar to this. Now, when I talk to kids, and if I ask 600 kids or whatever it is tomorrow, what would you like your parents to say on the sidelines of your game? What would they say? Nothing. Like, no one's ever got that wrong, right? So we know what our kids want, which is nothing. I've yet, in 4 years, ever met a kid who's like, I love it when my dad yells at the ref. It's so helpful. Really just makes me play better. No, not at all, right? So when we know that this is what our kids want, can we not give that to them? You know, I think an amazing comparison in sport is video games, right? Kids, did anyone beg their kids to play more video games? No, you're trying to say, no, well, why do they play video games? They're with their friends, there's no one yelling at them. But I think one really interesting thing, what do video game makers constantly do? They ask their users, what can we do to make this better so you'll play more? How often in sports do we ask our kids, what can we do so you'll play more? And then actually do it. We ask them, we get the results, and then we say, but you're a kid, you don't know. And then we wonder why they walk away. Right? If we want them to play more, we can ask them. If they say ice cream sundaes at halftime, no, we don't have to give them that. But we can certainly say, hey, you know what? This is what you want? Yeah, we can do that. I can be quiet on the sideline. And ask your son, ask your daughter. Maybe they say, I like when you're cheering. Maybe they say, you know what, just be quiet about it. And then give them that. I think that's so, so important. So when we look at these things, this is interfering. Think about a sport like soccer or hockey or lacrosse or basketball or any of these constant movement sports. The intelligence, it needs to be on the field, not on the sideline. If you're going to yell, right, in that split second, a soccer player, right, has to assess the situation, right, so they've got to read the game, they've got to come up with a series of choices to make, they've got to decide on a choice. If they're clever, they can add some deception to it, they have to technically execute it, then they have to assess their choice like that. How much input are they going to possibly take from us? It slows them down. So we're all going to feel right now what it feels like to be a kid in the middle of a game with 2 coaches on one sideline and 16 on the other. right? And this is called the Stroop effect. John Ridley Stroop was a psychologist in the 1930s, and it's a demonstration of cognitive interference with a physical task. So you actually slow down the reaction time of a physical task when you have cognitive interference. So here's the Stroop test. So it starts like this. We are all together as a group out loud going to read all these words, right? Green, yellow, purple, red, blue, yellow, all 4 lines as fast as we can. I know you're competitive in this part of the country, 8.5 seconds is the room record. So, out loud, as fast as you can, right? All these words, on your marks, get set, go. Ooh, that was really good, actually. That was like 9.5. That was pretty good. Now, just tell me what happened when the person next to you got a little bit ahead or behind. What happened? You say he was ruining it for you? He was slower. But what happens? What happens? You start hearing everyone. You lose your focus. You start getting stuck, right? That little bit of cognitive interference slows you down. But that's not even the Stroop test. That's a player playing without much interference. Here's a Stroop test. Same words, same font. But now what you're going to do, instead of reading the word, you're going to say the color. Blue, red, green, onwards, onwards. And I'm going to time you again, out loud. On your marks, set, go. Can we just agree that that wasn't as quick? Now, here's where I need your honesty. Who gave up? We're going, right? Right? Who gave up? Right? That's hard. That's hard. That's the Stroop effect. Right? When we add that interference, everything slows down. When we're yelling instructions to players on the field to kick it, pass it, shoot it, dribble it, smack them back, whatever it is, it slows down reaction time. And they are not able to make the decisions as fast as they could. Plus, it steals learning, right? If they are going to learn, they've got to figure out that this worked or this didn't work and assess it and move on. Right? If they don't, if we solve the problem for them this week, next week the same problem is going to arise, we're going to solve it again. And it's amazing when you get kids, as a coach, who have been coached by a problem solver, right? Who is constantly just do this, do this, do this. And then they come to you and you're quiet on the sideline. And here's a problem, and they're like, aren't you going to tell us what to do here? Right? And so this is such a huge, huge challenge, right? If we can just be quiet for our kids, if we can just talk to them, and if they say cheer, by all means cheer. I'm not saying that we should have silent sidelines everywhere, but as coaches, we need to stop coaching the people on the ball, and as parents, we need to let those kids make those decisions. Yeah?
So do you believe that coaches should be silent in youth sports?
So at Manchester United, when I was there, they have a rule with their young kids: don't coach while the ball's rolling, right? Which I really like. Try to coach the player off the ball. So instead of saying to my left defender, "Hey Johnny, pinch in and step up," I say, "Johnny, where do you think you should be right now?" "Oh, yeah," and then help him figure it out, right? Or what are you seeing there? Now this goes back to running more effective practices, and we talked about that with the coaches before. But how do I, just like a teacher in school, how do I run really effective practices that actually where kids learn, and then I check for understanding, I check for learning in practice by doing something again without giving them, all right, now here's the practice, and remember, this is what we're looking for you to do, versus I roll the ball out, play, we did this last week, let's see how it goes, and then have they really learned it or not, right? The number one thing I hear from coaches on the weekend is, well, we went over this in practice, right? So I'm not saying that coaches should be silent, but they certainly shouldn't be, dribble, pass, run, back, forward, right? That's it. And it's hard not to be. And I'm not saying that as a coach I never am, or I don't help a kid out, or just say, hustle back here or whatever. That would be totally untrue. But I try to pick and choose my moments of, hey, how can you figure this out? Where should you be right now? And then again, I've become much more reflective as a coach of, if they don't know this yet, I got to go back and teach it again. I got to go back and teach it again. I got to go back and teach it again until we're ready to move on. So yeah, silence, not necessarily, but I think great coaches, we have certain American sports where they're very coach-centric. American football, run 3 steps, turn around. There's very little room for creativity. But then you start seeing, in sports like basketball, coaches like Phil Jackson or Steve Kerr, where they're like, there's a lot of autonomy for the players to figure out, what are you seeing out there? What are you seeing out there? What are you seeing out there? Which I think is a far better question than, you should need to do this and this, right? What are you seeing out there? And then they can tell you what they're seeing, and maybe they're seeing something that you're not. Yeah, yes?
What do you think about crazy and or not crazy with your kids after a game? Like, if they have a great game, you say you had a great game, and then it's not a good game, and you say it was fun watching you play. You kind of know the difference there, right? So,
Yeah.
do you think there's room for both, or what?
Yeah. So obviously this idea of praise, and we're in the epicenter of Carol Dweck's work and mindset, this idea of, if we praise, let's praise the process, let's praise the work. Hey, you scored 3 goals today, you've been staying after practice doing extra finishing, right? That's why you're scoring those goals. Keep up the hard work, versus, you're the best player on earth, Johnny, thank you very much, right? That's so turning the focus on that. And then certainly with my teams, right, sort of this idea of, instead of focusing on, what can we say to them after something where it didn't go as well? Sometimes it's, what did you learn today from losing that's going to help you get better next week and better next time around? Right? That's a good conversation question that makes them more reflective versus, we lost, right? I don't think false praise is ever a good thing. And you can say, how was your focus? What was your effort like today? And get them to focus on that. You know what, I was a little distracted or whatever. Okay, fair enough. I also think, one of the really important things in the team development work that I do with my friend, Dr. Jerry Lynch, we always talk to our teams about, what are we doing that we need to keep doing to be successful? And what are we doing that we need to stop doing if we're going to get better? So those are really good things to ask your kids, right? What did you do today that you really need to stop doing or improve upon if you're going to be better next week? And I think those are the type of things, right? Now, I'm going to talk about the ride home in a little bit, so hold that thought, because it's a really important, crucial thing. I want to just save it all for one fell swoop there. Yeah.
Real quick on the interference, when you said cheering is okay, is there anything to support, like a negative response that the kids have out there when there's cheering? Because sometimes, let's say the opponent scores the goal and the other team's going crazy. Sometimes I wonder how that makes the kids feel. Like, is it too much? Like, does it feel like,
So cheering, how does it affect the other team? I think it's very age dependent. Do you guys see, was it 2 years ago in the Little League World Series, where this team was losing 17-0, and the outfielder came in and he pitched and he threw it to the other team's big home run hitter, and the kid hit this enormous home run, and the pitcher was like he was so impressed how far the kid hit it, right? So it's a great video, it's all on ESPN, but he was like, look how far he hit that ball I threw him. Right? So again, it's age dependent and it's child dependent, and I think, again, it all comes down to good conversations, right? Just ask your son, ask your daughter, how do you like it, right? But I think, really young kids often say, cheer for me, but also cheer for the other team. That's good advice. I don't think you have to cheer for the other team in high school. those kids are more mature and they get it. So yeah.
So I hear a lot of people, I mean, say that their approach to it changes when the games get serious. And there's this age somehow that people know when it's serious. And I'm kind of questioning that if it ever is more important from the life lessons, but is there a time when it changes, or you feel like a 17-year-old has it's okay to be more this, or is it still that focus should always be you work really hard at this task or this skill?
So it's a really interesting just choice of words, is this idea of when does this become serious, or when does this game really matter, right? So does anyone have like a 17, 18-year-old in the room who plays sports? A couple in the back. What was the score of their game last March 22nd? Right? So it might have felt like it was really important in that moment, but in the grand scheme of life, it wasn't that important, right? And so I think oftentimes it's us adults saying that this is really, really important while in the process of being an athlete. Like, yeah, if you're in a state championship game, that game matters, right? You've invested a lot to get there. But, you know, what are we willing to compromise to win? Right? And what's worth, what do we want the memory of this experience to be? Parents fighting in the stands because the game really meant a lot, or you know, hey, yeah, we won, and boy, that was a great game, and then we move on. Like, usually, kids move on pretty quickly. You know, even having been a Division I college coach, like, you know, those athletes, by hour 3 of the bus ride home from Maine to Vermont, like, they're moving on. It's usually us as coaches who stew over it and stew over it and stew over it. And so, I think you follow your kid's lead on it, but it's also our job as adults to paint the big picture. How does this fit into the grand scheme of life? You're going to have difficult games, you're going to have disappointing jobs, you're going to have disappointment in your life, you know, move on from it, right? There's no such thing as an overnight success. And I think one of the things that I recommend to parents a lot when their kids are sometimes, overly serious is the wrong word, but when they really don't deal well with setbacks, is read a biography of an athlete that your kid admires, because it's going to be about setbacks. It's going to be about disappointments. It's going to be about all those things. What I'm going to be talking about with the kids tomorrow is creating habits, daily habits, that are on par with what you want for tomorrow. And making sure those habits leave you in the position of being ready when that moment comes. So that's what I'm going to be talking about the kids tomorrow, is just that, you know, it's nice to say, I want this, but if I want this, what am I willing to do today and tomorrow and the next day to get that, right? What am I willing to struggle for? So, you know, I think, well, one of my soccer coach friends says this, and I love it. She goes, you know, it's a soccer game, it's not a soccer emergency. and I really believe that, you know, and even if I think about Division I college sports, coaching NCAA games, as much as you wanted to win, grand scheme of things, it wasn't really a soccer emergency, was it? Right? There's far more important things in life than what's happening.
I think Coach Lasser put it really, really good when he said that, you know, just the opportunity to be on a team is your opportunity to show your commitment every day. And that's what you can control. And that's kind of what it is all the way through high school. You know, you've got whatever level, you know, you're at. Instead of the winning.
Exactly. And the John Woodens, they didn't talk about winning, right? They talked about this idea of excellence as, you know, being the best that you're capable of being today with the tools that you have. And you can have your best game ever and still lose because the other team's just better. And that's life, right? And if you're a swimmer, you can maybe set a personal record so you can measure it. But if you're a soccer player, you can still lose 5-0. And that's life, you know? So, yeah, focusing on that process is massively, massively important. Great question. That's awesome. So let me zip through. In my book, I talk about this idea of how do we build this high-performing state of mind, right? These 7 C's: common sense, the right conditions, giving our kids control, good communication. I actually have a childhood friend who's a hostage negotiator in Southern Cal, and so he wrote the communication chapter with me. Like, if anyone can talk to a teenager, it's a hostage negotiator. Caring, competence, confidence, where do all these things come from? So I want to jump into a couple of them here. So first is this idea of giving your kids ownership of the experience, right? What the research says, sports scientist named Joe Baker, who's one of the experts, world experts on developing expertise, says any athlete needs 3 things: ownership, enjoyment, and intrinsic motivation. Those 3 things drive long-term performance, and only long-term performance gets you good at something, right? And so we have to help our kids own it, because once they own the experience, then we can push them towards their goals. When I was growing up on Long Island, I wanted to be a college soccer player. My dad didn't say, this is how you're going to do it. He said, well, what can you do to be better? And I remember as like a freshman or sophomore in high school complaining about my playing time. And I said, Dad, you need to talk to the coach. I don't think it's fair. My dad, right, he's a New York City fireman, Irish Catholic from the Bronx. That's not how it works, right? And he said, oh, really? He said, how many times in the last couple of weeks did you show up early for practice? How many times did you stay after and do more? Because, in fact, I don't actually remember you getting up before school and doing any extra work either. I was like, no. He goes, and you're, of course, the hardest working guy in practice every day, right? No. Because we'll tell you what, as soon as you do all those things for a couple of weeks, then I'll go talk to your coach. But that was like a light bulb moment for me. And it was amazing when I started staying after and doing extra fitness work. Guess who noticed? The coaches. Guess who noticed? The team captains. The people I play with said, that guy's working hard, right? And the playing time took care of itself. But I owned it. My dad said, well, what commitments do you want to make and how can I help you support those? So I work very hard with the players that I coach to do goal setting, and I ask them what their individual and team goals are, but then what commitments are they willing to make to do that? And even with my own daughter who says, I'm on the B team and I want to make the A team, well, what does that mean? Well, I want to make the A team. Well, what does that mean tomorrow? Right? Set some goal. I want to be able to juggle the ball 50 times. Great. And what does that mean? I'm going to go out 3 days a week and juggle for 20 minutes. Now we can measure that. We can check that off. I want to go to 1 extra practice a week. We can check that off. And now we start having these micro commitments that you're making and I'm supporting, and I'm pushing her to those goals. Hey, you said you wanted to do this. I just want to help. Right? So this is all super, super important. That's how we give kids control. Number 2, and this comes back to your question, how do we create the right conditions for success? And one of the most important things we can do is create the conditions for disappointment, for losing, right? I don't like the word failure, it has some finality to it, I don't love it. For being able to stumble, right? Making it safe to stumble, right? How do we make it safe for our kids to mess up, right? We have this term now with the helicopter parents in Canada, they call them snowplow parents, right? They just mow down all the obstacles, right? How do we know, and this is a really hard thing, how do we know when it's a dangerous situation where we need to step in? And how do we know where it's just a difficult situation where we can take a back seat and say, what do you learn from this? Right? What can we learn from losing that's going to make us better tomorrow? Because that's the process, right? And I don't think anyone says, oh yeah, I want my kid to win every game for the rest of his life or her life. Because we can arrange that, right? We can play bad teams and go to lousy tournaments and they can win 10-0 every time, and in 2 years they'll all be bored to death. Right? So challenge is good. Kids like challenges. Now, one of the places that they say over and over and over, where does it need to be safe, is the ride home. What do we say after a game? And this comes back to your question of one of the things that we are not good, we, including me, is assessing the emotional state of our kids when we decide to have the conversation. What we usually assess is, hey, we're stuck in the car and there's traffic, and so they're here, so let's have it now, because I have guaranteed FaceTime. And yet what the kids tell us is that when they're asked, what is your worst memory of sports? It's usually this, right? Because they're physically and emotionally exhausted. Sometimes we're emotionally spent, and yet we're going to make this a teachable moment. And what kids tell us over and over is that it's really not. So I have a video clip here from a really cool show. It's on Netflix, I think still, called Trophy Kids. I don't know if any of you have seen it. But this is actual footage. This isn't actors of the ride room.
Did you tell the coach to put you inside the game?
Yep.
How many? Dude, you're not getting it done. Let me explain something to you. If you do something wrong, do I tell you?
Yep.
Okay, I correct it. Or I tell you so you can correct it. How do you know what to correct if you don't even know why he pulled you out of the game? What did I tell you about that? Are you scared of him or something? So why don't you go ask him? Like right now, you know we're gonna have this conversation after the game. You know it's coming. Okay, this is part of you becoming a young man. If someone does something, you're just gonna take it? So if I was to walk up to you and just slap you inside your face, what are you gonna do? Just turn around and be like, I don't know why that guy did that. It doesn't make any sense, Jay. You act like you're 10 or 9 or 8. Dude, you're just going through the motions. If you're gonna be selfish, you know what? You have other brothers and sisters. Okay, we'll take you from out of that school and give them a chance to put them in a private school. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. It confuses me. What's the problem?
Every time I come back, like in the car, I always feel like I'm in trouble or I did something wrong.
Well, did you? You've had more personal training than any of those kids out there. Okay? Back to the drawing board. Back up to getting early, back up inside the morning. Okay? Because it doesn't make any sense. You have me driving back and forth from this school. Back and forth, back and forth. Back and forth for you to go out and do absolutely nothing. I don't understand why you don't get it. I don't understand it.
For those who've seen this, you remember how this ended? Yeah, he quit football, right? And he moved out. His dad moved across the country with his mom. So a couple months ago now, we put this clip on our Facebook page, and it was a really interesting back and forth. And the conversation, two sides, one side was, it's a dad who's making big commitments for his kid and has expectations. And I agree. Just not there. Remember, he asked his kid, every time I get in the car, I feel like I did something wrong. Every commute, I'm being told how wrong I am, how bad I am. Every time that kid is on the field, listening before a play to his inner voice, what's the inner voice telling him? It's the words that he hears most often, which are from his dad saying, you're not getting it done. What's the chances that he's going to make a play? A lot less. So it was really interesting, this back and forth happened, and all of a sudden this guy chimes in, he says, I was the cameraman. I was sitting in the front seat. And he said, and he told the story how the dad was a college football player, got drafted, got arrested, didn't make the NFL. So his son was going to make the NFL in his place. But he never bothered asking his son if he wanted to do it. And he was going through the motions because he didn't really want to be out there playing football, being constantly criticized by his dad for doing everything wrong. And so I think the most important thing you can do is just ask your kids. Some kids, I used to like talking about the game on the way home. My daughter does. She always brings it up. If your son or your daughter brings it up, by all means have a conversation. Ask questions. What did you think? How do you think it went? Jesus. I'm a writer. Right? Ask questions. Get good feedback. When they put it to bed, put it to bed. That's fine. If your son or daughter doesn't bring it up, find a better time to have that conversation, especially if you know something about the sport. As a coach, for me, this was my post-game talk. I realized that there's very few things that I have to say right after a game, especially when I'm angry or disappointed, that can't be said before the next practice, when they're actually ready to learn and they want to be taught. But not when they're already upset and they already lost. Okay? So think about this moment. Now this is really hard. I don't know if you've seen my TED Talk, but I'll share the story again. When my son was 5 years old, his first soccer game, I was so proud, right? Dad coaching son's first game. My son walks on the field and goes, "No, I'm not playing." And he walks off. And I was like, okay, that's fine, TJ, that's fine. We go to practice that week, he plays, he's fine. Game 2, we roll up, there's a game before us, my son's a big introvert, he loves playing golf, snowboarding, go figure. And all the parents are screaming, and our game's about to start, and he does it again, he's like, "I'm not playing." And now I'm embarrassed, and I'm thinking, what does everyone think of me? I'm supposed to be this all-star coach, my kid won't play. TJ's happy because he found like a lizard or something over here. Right? He's perfectly happy. And so we get in the car after the game. I'm mad. I'm angry. And so I'm like, TJ, and all of a sudden, wham, I get karate chopped by my wife who's sitting next to me. And I was like, "What was that for?" She goes, "Really? Didn't you write a book about this?" Once again, she was right. Right? So if you can have that conversation with your kids and respect their decision, again, asking them, how can we make this better so you'll play more, right? And respect their decision. If they want to talk about it, great. If they don't, great, right? And let that go. It makes a huge difference. And then the last thing that makes a huge difference is this idea of 5 words that he mentioned as well. I love watching you play. Letting your kids know that your love for them has nothing to do with sport outcomes or whether they won or lost. Just that you love watching them compete. You love watching them there. I learned these words from my friend Bruce Brown 10, 12 years ago, and a huge difference for me as a dad and as a coach. I get more phone calls and more emails from people about this than anything else. And it all starts with, I thought that was simple, but that was dumb. But boy, did that change everything. Boy, that changed everything. This guy right here, Peter Smith, I don't know if there's tennis people in here. Pretty successful tennis coach, 5-time NCAA champion at USC. And when my book first came out, he bought the book, or someone gave him the book because his oldest son wanted to quit tennis. And he sent me an email and he just said, "Thank you for that book. It changed the whole dynamic of my relationship with my kids." Because what I realized was that I could never stop being their coach. Right? Practice never ended, the match never ended. And I just thought I was helping. But my kids grew to hate it. They didn't want to practice, they didn't want to play. So when I started just telling them I love watching them play, and practice ended, and we did whatever else we did when we were just a family, and I was just dad, it was this amazing thing happening. Like at first, my kids looked at me like, "Who are you, and what did you do with my dad?" Right? And then they were like, they started practicing more. They started wanting to play matches. They took ownership of the experience, and he let it be theirs. And 2 years ago now, September, I was in LA, and we were supposed to have lunch, and he had to cancel because his oldest son, the one, he bought the book because his son was like, "I'm quitting tennis," was in the finals of the US Open for junior doubles. So now one of the best junior players in the world, now he plays for his dad at USC, right? Was walking away from tennis until his dad took a step back and said, "This experience is yours, and I just love watching you compete. So if you take nothing from tonight, take that, try it, it works. Make that your 10%. Make that your 10%. It makes a huge, huge difference." So my last piece is this, because I know we started a little bit late, we need to get out of here. So we need to make a movement. We need to spread this word. There's lots of people in this community that aren't here tonight that maybe want to be. Spread the word to them. So how do we make a movement? My last video for you, how do you make a movement in 3 minutes or less? One of my all-time favorites.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. See, it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out, you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute, you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is overglorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
That's how we roll in Oregon, baby. So thank you for all your time tonight. There's all my information, all the work we do. I hope you'll jump on our website, changethegameproject.com, Facebook page. We're up to about 70,000 people now. Twitter, we started a podcast a couple months ago, which is we're just been able to interview some amazing sports scientists and authors and coaches and athletes. Any way that you get your information and want to share it with others, that's how we make a movement. Right now it is risky on the sidelines to stand up and be like, maybe we shouldn't do this. But sooner rather than later, you get a couple people and a couple people. And you can change one team at a time, one club at a time, one school at a time, one community at a time. And if we do that, right, we can start making sports about the needs and the values and the priorities of our kids. That's how we keep them in the game, and that's how we let sports make that tremendous impact on them that it made on me and probably made on a lot of you as well. So thank you all so very much.